so first of all, this is not a motorcycling channel. This is just a channel about all of the things that I'm interested in, and for a while now that has also included motorcycles. So, about a year ago I got what is effectively a small motorcycle license. So in essence, an extension for my already existing car driver's license that allowed me to also ride small capacity motorcycles with up to 125 cc's of engine capacity or a maximum of 15 horsepower. The reason for me to get that extension small license instead of a full motorcycle license was simply A, the cost of it, B, the fact that all I had to do was basically take a few hours with an instructor to learn how to ride a motorcycle without taking an actual test, and C, I just wanted to see if motorcycling is actually something that I'm interested in and that I want to get into further, or if I don't really actually enjoy it at all. So this was a way for me to get in cheap and just try out the water and figure out whether or not it's for me. And as it turns out, it absolutely is for me. Now a year has gone by, and by now I actually do have a full motorcycle license, and 3 or 4 weeks ago I picked up my first full-size motorcycle, which I'm so happy about. It is a Triumph Scrambler 900, the 2023 model. I ordered that guy back in September of 2022. It finally arrived and I was able to pick it up, and I couldn't be happier. But in the meantime, so from May of 2022 up until recently, my motorcycle was a Mutt RS-13 125cc. Since I do now have the Triumph, I will most likely sell the Mutt because I simply don't have much of a use for it anymore. But when I decided to buy my Mutt motorcycle back in 2022, there were very few videos out available that went into detail about Mutt's motorcycles and what they like to own, and therefore I wanted to make a video about my experience of owning the Mutt RS-13 for about a year now, and share it with you for anyone who might potentially be facing the same purchasing decision. There will be timestamps in the description below if you're only interested in any specific aspects of this video, but without any further ado, let's get into it. So this bike is called the Mutt RS-13. It's one of many of Mutt's offerings, which mostly all follow the same idea and concept, but with slightly different features. The RS-13 comes in a 125cc and a 250cc version, as most of Mutt's bikes do. There are, however, differences between those versions, even beyond the differences in engine size. Most notably, the lack of ABS, a shorter wheelbase, different speedometer and different exhaust system on the smaller models. But they do look very similar overall. I obviously went for the 125cc version for the simple reason that that is all I was allowed to ride back when I got my bike. Mutt Motorcycles is a very young company based in Birmingham, and I do have very limited information about them, so do take all of this with a big grain of salt. From what I understand, the engines both in the 125cc and the 250cc versions are variants of the GN 125 or GN 250 respectively, and they are built under license in China, and then the whole motorcycle is assembled in England, and Mutt also fits a couple of custom-made parts that are actually being built in-house just for their bikes, like for example the exhaust system. Now a lot of people have concerns about these bikes because of the Chinese built engines, but we'll talk more about reliability later on in this video. There are loads of alternatives for bikes like this, all following the same recipe. A great retro design harking back to the glory days of Triumphs and other name brand manufacturers, cheap prices, mostly built in China, and they promise to deliver the charm and character of those old 70s styles motorcycles without actually having to spend the money, find one in the first place and having to maintain them, and while also offering most if not all of the amenities that people want to have in a modern motorcycle. With Mutt's motorcycles actually sitting fairly high up in terms of prices for motorcycles like this, is this the real deal or is it too good to be true? Let's talk about it. Now I think there's no argument here about this bike being just absolutely stunning to look at. It's a stop in the street good looking bike. And I mean that quite literally, as I was once actually stopped at an intersection with a man first shouting at me, asking me about my bike, and when I didn't react and actually was trying to ride off, he actually jumped in front of me because he wanted to know so badly what this motorcycle is. And that was by far not the only instance of this sort with the Mutt RS-13. So yeah, in terms of aesthetics, I think there is just no doubt that this is a good looking bike, and if you want something beautiful, this is the way to go. Anyway, one of the main concerns I had when I first thought about getting that 125cc motorcycle license was the general size of those 125cc motorcycles. Because with a lot of them, you can just see that they are not full-sized motorcycles, even from a distance, because everything looks just smaller in proportion. And to be honest, that is true with the Mutt RS-13 and the 125cc version as well. But only to a degree, and Mutt Motorcycles has done a fairly good job at sort of masking the fact that this is only a small motorcycle. One of the main reasons for that are the huge 18-inch stubby tires. If nothing else, they certainly make the bike look a little more grown up. As I said earlier, the 125cc version of this bike does have a shorter wheelbase than the 250cc version, and that is very noticeable when you look at it from the side. But overall, I think it's fine. And most importantly, this is still big enough to ride it with a pillion. Just make sure to adjust the preload on the suspension and you're good to go. Oh yeah, and also keep the general lack of power and the maximum weight limitations in mind while you're doing that. While the aesthetics may be one of the most attractive features of this bike, the reliability and build quality are probably one of the main concerns when people are actually thinking about buying a bike of this sort. I gotta be honest, I didn't really do a lot of research before I purchased my Mutt motorcycle, but to be fair, there was also not a whole lot of information out there when I made my purchasing decision. So it was just after I already had bought my motorcycle, but before I actually picked it up from the dealer, that I found a Facebook group that had a significant amount of horror stories about Mutt's motorcycles in it, and that sort of freaked me out, if I'm honest. There were stories about serious quality issues, bikes breaking down literally just a few hundred meters after getting out from the dealership, and just a very bad experience in terms of the customer service overall. And I think it's unnecessary to say that reading all of that made me absolutely question my decision for a good while. Anyway, I've now owned this bike for just over a year and I've put about 2,000 kilometers on the clock, and much to my own surprise, I have just about 0 issues to report. I did get the occasional weird noise here and there, and once while I was waiting at a red light, the engine cut off for no obvious reason. Still to this day, I don't know why. I basically just started the bike back up again and it was absolutely fine. No idea what went wrong there. My suspicion is that it had something to do with the kickstand. Maybe I accidentally touched it or something, but yeah, that's pretty much it if I'm honest. Other complaints in terms of build quality and reliability perhaps might include the fact that every now and again when I'm standing at a red light in neutral, it's not actually easy to get it into first gear right away. What I have to do then is just hold in the clutch and move the bike a couple of centimeters forwards or backwards, and maybe feather the clutch a bit to get it into gear, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, and before I forget it, I didn't ride the motorcycle for about 3 months during the winter. I had the bike out in the garage, and after I tried to start it for the first time, or when I started it for the first time, it took quite a while until the bike actually started. It did eventually start, but yeah, it was a bit of a process. So I just had to hold the start engine button down for a couple of seconds and wait for the engine to turn over and cough for a bit, and that was basically it. But from what I've read, that's kind of normal with motorcycles, no idea, but I've also read that the batteries that Mutt's motorcycles come with are notoriously bad and need to be replaced pretty much right away. So I guess I do have to invest in a new battery, which will cost me somewhere around the 40 to 45 euro mark, and I'm pretty sure that that will fix the issue. But right now we're in the middle of summer. it's not really an issue anyway. It's just starting up right away. Just as a side note though, I have actually been in contact with Mutt's customer service here in Germany. For the first time, that was because I wanted to ask them where I could get my bike serviced, because the closest dealership is actually about 400 kilometers away. And the second time was because the dealership that I eventually ended up purchasing my motorcycle from forgot to give me a manual as well. So they were kind enough to just send me a PDF via email, and that was good enough for me. So on both of those occasions, it took them a couple of days to respond, but they did eventually respond. They were very nice, very helpful. So I would still rate that as a good customer service experience overall. In conclusion, so far I actually have nothing bad to say about this motorcycle in terms of build quality and reliability, and the customer service seems to be fine as well. I mean, obviously you can't expect the same level of overall build quality and quality of parts as you can expect with other brands like Triumph and BMW and Ducati and whatnot. It's just not the same. But then again, you're paying probably a third of the price or maybe even less. But for what it is, the build quality is actually fairly decent. In terms of the parts that you actually get with the Mutt motorcycle, I was rather surprised that at least they made a noticeable effort to make the bike feel high quality. And you can see that in stuff like the metal fuel tank, the overall very decent paint quality, the fact that this comes with an actual metal underbody protection, unlike my Triumph Scrambler 900, which actually comes with a plastic sump guard protector, and the aluminium one that I got is an optional extra, and it's not cheap. Also, the front and rear mud guards are metal as well. So overall, pretty much everything that your eye can see, pretty much everything that you touch sort of feels high quality. Obviously, the brakes are not name brand, they are cheap, so are the suspension and well, pretty much everything else. But they tried to, at the very least, make the motorcycle feel expensive or more expensive than it actually is. And so the bike overall looks and feels like it is finished to a way higher standard than what the price tag would suggest. I would class the ride quality as decent. Now granted, I do have very limited experience in terms of riding different motorcycles. I rode a KTM Duke 125 and a BMW GS 850 or 850 GS when I got the training for my big boy motorcycle license, and obviously I do now have quite a bit of experience with my new Triumph Scrambler 900, and I did also get the chance to ride a Triumph Street Triple 765 RS last weekend, but that's about it. So in comparison, I think it's unnecessary to say that the ride quality of the Mutt is not on the same level as a BMW 850 GS or even the Triumph Scrambler 900. It's just not. With that being said, overall, I would still say that the ride quality is very decent and absolutely usable. Now, there are two obvious main reasons why the ride quality of the Mutt cannot be compared to more expensive bikes and full-sized motorcycles. The first reason obviously being the fact that all of the components, as in suspension, seats and whatnot, that you get on the motorcycle are obviously of lesser quality. They cost less to manufacture and they don't work quite as well. And then there's the second fact that this bike only weighs 117 kilos. That is just about 100 kilos lighter than my Triumph Scrambler 900. And you will notice that it is a lot more reactive to potholes, to objects and whatnot. That's just physics, I guess. Talking about the seat, I'm happy to report that the seat is actually rather comfortable as well. Obviously, a 125cc motorcycle is not necessarily a big touring machine, but at the very least, I did one 400 kilometer journey with this motorcycle and it went quite well. Nothing bad to report here. Most of these 400 kilometers were spent on the Autobahn, wedged in between trucks on the right lane. So I was going rather slowly, but sitting in between trucks, you do get a lot less wind resistance, which also had the positive side benefit of the engine not being as stressed as it would have been if I wasn't riding behind a truck all the time. Obviously, there is the disadvantage of being sort of uncomfortable and hoping that none of these truck drivers will accidentally run you over. But I gotta say that it was, for me at least, a fairly pleasant experience overall. Certainly not something that I want to do every week, but it's certainly doable. And the main reason for me not to use this for touring is actually not the comfort level, but just the sheer lack of power and the fact that you can't easily just pull out and overtake someone if the need arises. Also, on a side note, while I didn't experience any reliability issues with my Mutt, there is still always that fear that this might happen just because of how inexpensive this bicycle is in the great scheme of things. I mean, obviously it's still $4,000, but for a motorcycle, that is not a lot of money. So I always had that voice in my head that was like, it's going to break down. It's going to break down any minute now. You can't expect a cheap motorcycle like this to run forever. What are you doing? And that kind of also would keep me from using it for long distance touring. And that sort of neatly also brings us to the next point, which is the power and performance of the engine in this Mutt motorcycle. Now, according to Mutt's website, this bike offers a stunning and neck-breaking 11 horsepower. And even in the realm of 125cc motorcycles, that is not a lot. Most of them are somewhere in the range of 15 horsepower. And yeah, especially when you're dealing with such little power, having 4 HP more or less actually does make a huge difference. So as for the performance, gotta be honest, it's bad. It's really not good. Again, even for a 125cc motorcycle. The fastest speed that I actually got this motorcycle up to was on the Autobahn at 116 kilometers per hour, but that was going downhill. Now that is really not too bad, but mind you, if you're going uphill with this motorcycle or against a strong headwind, your top speed will reduce fairly quickly to, well, 80 kilometers per hour. If you're lucky, might even be less. And if you're going down a steep incline, and we're talking like 12 to 14%, well, your top speed is probably more in the range of 40 to 50 kilometers per hour. And at that point, in a lot of places at least, you're actually holding up traffic and you have the motorcycle engine in second gear screaming at the top of its little lungs, and it's not a pleasant feeling. There are reports of other owners who claim that their Mutt always goes up to 100 kilometers per hour, completely reliable, and there are others who say that theirs is barely able to get to 70. So there seems to be a bit of a variation. Mine is somewhere in between. But yeah, overall, I would not expect neck-breaking speed. That's also not what this bike is really made for. If you're going fast or if you're going in the upper range of the revs, you will also feel quite a lot of vibrations through the whole motorcycle. So also do keep that in mind. With that being said, the performance is absolutely and 100% adequate for all kinds of around town riding. You can always easily get up to 50 or 60 kilometers while you're in town very comfortably. You can just go through all of the gears. It makes a lovely noise while it's doing so, and it's easily fast enough to whiz in and out of traffic while you're going around town. Also, while we are talking about the sound, in terms of the exhaust note, I think it's perfectly fine for a little one-cylinder engine. It does have that thumpiness and the deep burble or whatever you want to call it that Mutt is actually quite famous for. So it sounds rather lovely for what it is. It feels most at home in terms of the sound quality in the lower rev ranges, and there is a high-pitched whirring sound that is always present, sometimes more, sometimes less, and I was kind of suspicious of that at first, but it just seems to be part of the experience of riding this particular motorcycle. So yeah, I got used to it and I do actually quite like it. So to round off that segment, the motorcycle is certainly more than adequate for around town riding, and that's also where it performs its best and where it sounds its best. There there are also a bunch of minor quirks that I wanted to talk about. These are really not issues, so I didn't want to fit them in earlier in the reliability section, but I thought they were still at the very least worth mentioning. So first of all, while the bike certainly looks great, it also certainly prioritizes aesthetics over functionality. The indicators, for example, look cool, but they are not very functional. My wife once drove behind me while we are getting the Mutt for its first service, and after that she told me that she couldn't for the life of her see when I was using my indicators. She was completely sure that I simply wasn't using them at all. And that is actually quite dangerous, especially when you're on a small, lightweight motorcycle and you really need people to be able to predict what you're going to do next so that they can make room for you and not run you over. And then there's the issue of the license plate holder. In Germany, there are rules and regulations for just about everything, and that includes the angle of your license plate on your motorcycle. And the license plate holder that the Mutt RS-13 came with is 100% not in compliance with those rules and regulations. I have absolutely no idea how they actually managed to get the compliance certificate with that license plate holder. There is a guy on eBay who makes 3D printed brackets that you can use to modify your license plate holder so that it is actually compliant and so that the police will hopefully not pull you over and give you a huge fine. On a less important note, the mud guards, they do look great, they feel great, but they're not actually doing much of a good job. So if you're using this in the wet or in the dirt, expect that you will get dirty as well. So that is one reason to only use this motorcycle in good weather. Another reason would be the fact that the tires of this motorcycle are not great. Not great on dry asphalt, but it's certainly not great on wet asphalt. I mean, to be fair, that's a pretty common theme with off-road heavy tires, but you do have to be aware of that. Even with the little power that this motorcycle makes, it's not like you're doing burnouts, but at the very least, it's a bit of a sketchy feeling when you're going around bends. But oh well, I mean, at the very least, these tires will probably perform great off-road, right? Maybe? I don't know. I mean, there are videos of people taking their Mutts off-road and they seem to be an absolute riot. But when I looked through the warranty book, I actually realized that you will lose your warranty if you actually dare to take this bike off-road. And that is just so stupid to me. The fact that you lose your warranty if you take a bike that looks like this off-road just means that all that Mutt is doing is they're going for the posers, and that kind of annoys the hell out of me. So take this off-road if you want to. Just be aware of the fact that, from what I understand at least, you do lose your warranty. But from what I could gather, watching videos of other people taking their Mutts off-road, they actually seem to be quite capable. Well, so in conclusion, what was my experience like owning this motorcycle for over a year, and would I buy it again? Well, overall, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. I've certainly had a ton of fun with this bike, but at the same time I was always painfully aware of its limitations, namely its lack of power and the low top speed. Because of this, it was sometimes just hard to fully enjoy it, because at least in the region where I live, you can hardly ever go anywhere without coming across a country road with a legal speed limit of 100 km per hour, which this bike can hardly ever get to. And there are a lot of moderate to steep inclines around here as well, which this bike also does struggle with. So whenever I was out on one of these roads, I immediately became kind of unnerved when I saw someone pulling up behind me, because I just knew that I was a slow-moving roadblock for them. Aside from that though, I thoroughly enjoyed my 1 year of ownership. When this bike is in its element, it's just a ton of fun. It looks great, has a lovely sound to it, rides very decently, and it just has that cool factor. So, in conclusion, who's this bike really for? Well, if you live in a major metro area and you want to have a motorcycle instead of something like a scooter or a Vespa just to bob around town, maybe visit coffee shops and restaurants, this bike is just absolutely perfect. It looks the part, it makes you kind of feel like Steve McQueen, so it is a good alternative to a scooter or a Vespa, with a bit of the charm of just riding a motorcycle, and you will also certainly be able to hit the occasional country lane every once in a while. Another reason for people to maybe get this motorcycle is for the same reason that I did, just to basically dip your toe into the water and see if, well, riding motorcycles is actually your thing or not. And I think this is a good way to start. I think even with the lack of power, It is quite fun, and it is also obviously very forgiving. And who knows what might have happened if I would have stepped up to a full-size motorcycle right away. I might have made a stupid mistake and maybe I would not be sitting here today. So overall, I do not regret making this decision at all, and I would do it again 100%. However, with that being said, I'm obviously now in the process of selling this motorcycle, but would I buy this motorcycle again now that I do also have a full motorcycle license? And the obvious answer for me is no, absolutely not. Not because I have anything against Mutt motorcycles. Actually, I am very fond of the idea of buying a 250cc version, but I would certainly also go for the 250cc version because that lack of power, that lack of torque is just very limiting overall, and at times it also does actually feel kind of dangerous, if you like, because you're just holding up traffic, and that also always has the danger of leading to, well, dangerous overtake maneuvers and yeah, this sort of behavior. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the Mutt Motorcycles RS-13, the 125cc version. I hope you enjoyed this video and that at least one or two people got some value out of it. This is certainly not a video for my main audience, which is fractured enough already. I'm so sorry about this. This channel is all over the place. But whatever, this is my channel. This is just about the stuff that I'm interested in. And again, right now that includes a lot of motorcycle stuff. There might be videos about other motorcycles, including my Triumph Scrambler 900 in the future. But anyway, again, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below, or what you think about, well, this motorcycle or any other motorcycles of this sort. And yeah, if you're interested in random stuff, maybe click subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. Take care. Bye bye.